So let's do our chant together. The three refuges. Buddhang saranang gacchami, dhammang saranang gacchami, sanghang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami, tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Settling and tuning in to what is even among what is uneven, among what's agitated or restless, needy. So instead of looking at the agitation, wisdom or awareness is interested in what is it that's already even among what is uneven, here and now, in the experience of the mind and body right now. And it isn't so much that we find some wonderful wisdom that will protect us and give us immunity from being pushed around by our thoughts, by emotion, It's more about letting whatever it is that can cease, letting it cease. Letting what is extra end. Without bothering to renew anything. And making no presumptions, just letting whatever can cease, cease. And we don't even have to be worried if patterns re-arise, because wisdom understands that they will also cease on their own without some clever Dharma person having to make them go away. So instead of me as a Buddhist practitioner practicing with the various defilements that arise in my mind, we're just sitting here with great confidence that everything comes and it goes. So we'll let it go then. We'll let nature be nature. So easy. Makes so much sense. One of my teachers once called it non-distracted non-meditation. Because even the idea that I'm meditating is an unnecessary weight, unnecessary constriction. So we can let it cease. And if thought keeps re-arising, and if those thoughts that keep arising are seductive, drawing the mind in, then just make a more careful study of the nature of thought. What is this thought? What is the nature of this thought? Let it reveal itself. Don't presume anything about thought, about the content of the thought, and more importantly, about the very nature of thought itself. Just study it as a phenomena being known in the present moment, the thoughts that are coming and going. Notice that they also cease. Really get interested in that moment when a thought ends. And that space or that experience of that ending, that ceasing of a thought. What does it teach the heart about the nature of thought? Not so much what thought is, as much as it's what thought isn't. It isn't self, or what belongs to a self. It's just that natural phenomena that comes and goes, that we can directly observe. So let's continue practicing in silence for a while. a wise teacher of mine, summed up the Buddhist teachings as everything arises and passes and is not self. So let's see if that instruction, that pointing out instruction, can be helpful in helping us get really close to the truth of our own experience now. Especially in terms of mental activities. So that means if there appears to be some mental construction, a thought, an emotion that seems permanent, doesn't seem to be coming and going, then get really interested, really open, let it reveal itself for what it is. Is it solid, permanent, actually personal? What is its nature? So we're learning to trust our own experience, not Buddhist philosophy. So remember, it's a very particular training we're undertaking to observe the activity of thought and emotion as a present moment phenomena, and not to be spellbound by the content of the thoughts and emotions, but instead to observe it more as a natural phenomena, an energetic mental phenomena. What is the nature of these thoughts? Do they arise and pass, and they're empty of a fixed self? They don't refer back. They don't arise out of a fixed me or I. But we check for ourselves. as we practice, we align with the Buddhist teachings. Sensations come and go and are not self, not I, not me, not mine. So we practice using the Buddha's view, so to speak. See if we can support being intimate, clearly aware, and deeply understanding. Sensations come and go and are not self. Is that true in my experience? Not I, not me, not mine. Sound comes and goes and is not self. Sound is not I, not me, not mine. So we check with our own experience. Same with visual experience. Seeing is not self, it comes and goes, not I, not me, not mine. So we study seeing whether or not the eyes are open, just as it actually is in our experience. And mental activity, thinking, it arises, it passes, and is not self. Not I, not me, not mine. So again, just turning, observing the mental activities as they actually are, not getting confused by the content of our thoughts, but just observing the thoughts as natural phenomena, as they are. All things arise and then pass and are not self, not personal. Not I, not me, not mine. Can this be okay? Just to let things be as they are. And the practice itself comes and goes and is not self. And any understanding that arises from the practice, past and present, sensing the natural process of all things here. What's very clear is that this is being known. The experience as it is being known. And can this be enough? This simple truth of the moment, this is being known. And how dynamic that unfolding is. Resting in the flow of things coming and going in this natural way. In any diluted thinking, any diluted understanding that might be present, that also unfolds, it comes and goes. Even delusion and ignorance is not self. Just an unfolding natural process. Unfolding because of so many causes and conditions coming and going. Same with wisdom. Take a minute, stretch. And I'm grateful that Mary has offered to give a little Dana talk on generosity. So I'm going to invite Mary. Mary, you can either sit here or on the bench here, because then the camera will see you. Want to sit here? Yeah. And here, why don't you use my mic? Oh, good. Katie, would you turn the coffee lights on that panel? And you have to do the thing there on the bottom. Perfect. Yeah, a little lower. Perfect. Thanks.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Mary. I've been hanging around Common Grounds off and on for about the last 25 years. And I like that I get a chance to do Dana by giving a Dana talk. That's kind of cool. And my first thoughts about it was I grew up in a family where the concept of Dana was very important, though that's not at all what they called it. But I grew up observing my parents being very active in offering what they had back to the community. They didn't have much money, but they did what they could. They swung hammers, and they cleaned, and they cooked, and they coached, and there was always an extra room for an extra plate and an extra person on a couch or whatever. And it was just part of being community. Somewhere along the line, somebody said to me that there's no observers in a community. The community is about involvement and being a part of. And for me, that really is about Dana. Excuse me, I have allergies. It's kind of messing with my voice a little bit. And when I first came to Common Grounds, I also, cash was not readily available, but I was young and I had a lot of energy. And so over the years, I've worked with the garden committee, I've cleaned, I've cooked, I've given people rides. Last week, I learned how to run the owl, which was pretty cool. And so just being part of the community really, for me, is about being present. And as a 90% introvert, I also find that I do better when I have a task. I'm not really good at potlucks and things like that, but when I can join people through a common goal in an activity, it brings me joy. And I have a minister friend who said that when it comes to like the collection plate, he's like, don't give out of obligation and don't give till it hurts. He says, give out of joy. And that always really stuck with me. And I find that I do get great joy in that ability to connect that way. And it's definitely not about money. I think that money's the easy part. It's easy to throw, cash in a bowl when you have it, whatever you have. But it's the time, it's the talent that everybody has to offer. It's the stuff that's really, it feels good. And I find that this particular conversation we've been having over these weeks about selflessness really connects Donna for me in that way, because I can really identify myself with my stuff, my time, my abilities. And I find that giving it away is one of the best ways for me to recognize what a ridiculous concept that is, and how wonderful it feels and how connected I feel. And I've noticed that the times in my life when I feel the loneliest is when I'm so gripped that I don't think I have time, I don't have energy, I don't have the resources. And that's usually when I feel the most disconnected, is when I convince myself that I don't have enough. And so that giving is a really beautiful way for me to find that, excuse me, that connection and freedom. And I really do, I feel so grateful at this point in my life that I finally have reached that point where the money is easier, and I've been a monthly sustainer at Common Grounds now for a few years. And it feels fantastic to be able to do that and to still cook and clean and schlep and figure out how they all works and all of those things. So yeah, I think that's my spiel.
Thanks,
Okay.
Mary.
You're welcome.
Beautiful. And
Here.
hopefully other people will be inspired and do what Mary did and stick your neck out. And any program that you regularly attend, like Buddhist Studies or maybe one of the weekly practice groups, just let who's ever teaching know you want to do that. And Shelley or I, or whoever it might be, Ramesh, will find a time for you to give a short, speech, whatever you want to call that, just opening your heart, like how it is for you. Because it really helps us. We're all negotiating the space, and not just in terms of your relationship to Common Ground, but so many places in our lives. Like, how can we be all in without being caught and oppressed by a transactional way of, relating to whatever we're talking about? Because that's just a way to suffer. And I think you're right, Mary, that it really does have a lot to do with the teachings on Anatta. Anatta is good news because it's integrating these teachings or illuminating them in our lives that actually allows us to be in community, to be all in, in a way that's a cause for happiness for us and all around. I mean, it's so obvious, when we look at who's in the news, celebrities, politicians, it's just so obvious how because we observe these people and their self-centeredness, that's like in living color, and we see the reverberations of suffering. I mean, it's the same with us, but we're just not on TV, in the news all the time. And it's just, that really sets so much suffering in motion. And we really could, spend the next 20 years unpacking the Buddhist teachings on anatta. One of the things that I read that it's just really instructive, hopefully it will resonate for you, because we have this, it's just so much easy for us to conceive, okay, there's a self, or even if I think of it as, this problem that I have to be a self, to take things personally, right? Oh, and that makes me get entangled with greed, hatred, and delusion. And if only I could get rid of the self. But this little teaching I came across, I have over and over again, because different teachers talk about this point in different ways, but that it's not the self that generates greed, hatred, and delusion, or the self that generates the grasping, the attachment. It's really that habit of grasping that leads to selfing. Like this world we live in, this human existence, this realm, is a realm of grasping, right? From a Buddhist cosmological point of view, this reality that we're all living in, existing in, arises because of this. It's like a whirlpool is one of the images that's used a lot in the Buddhist tradition. It's something, and this something, this whirlpool, this existence we all have, we call it grasping. And when there's grasping, it's the grasping that leads to selfing, because if the whole vibe is about grasping, selfing is a really nice, it really works well. It's an efficient way to perpetuate grasping, taking things personally. Puts the grasping on hyperdrive. So one of the takeaways from that point of view, then, selfing is just an activity. There isn't a self that's a problem. There's a natural process, like a whirlpool, that has gotten set in motion. So the interesting question is, when there's what, there's grasping. When there's this, there's that. So what is it that sets in motion this whirlpool that we experience? And the short answer is when there's ignorance, when there's misperceiving and misunderstanding. So we'll have small groups later in the evening, just a heads up. And I'll just share some of the thoughts you might reflect on in your small groups, these non-optional small groups. Lock the doors. And we know how many are there on Zoom. Yeah, it's really good. And remember, you can always pass in the small groups. But it's a little bit what Mary was talking about, like this commitment to community and just showing up, even if you're showing up as someone who doesn't have anything to say. That's okay, right? But some of the things you can reflect on in the small groups is this experience of conceit, like however we conceive of me, I'm the same as you. I don't know if you saw the email I sent today, but there's a really good article by Christina Feldman, one of the founding teachers really of Insight Meditation Center, and Gaia House in England, another Insight Meditation Center in England. And I think it's titled On My Way to Bowing or something like that. It was in one of the Buddhist journals, which I copied for all of us. You should all eventually join one of those Buddhist journals so we reimburse them for use of their wonderful articles. I'm trying not to do that anymore, but I thought this was so good, and I know not everyone, you generally with those like Tricycle and Buddha Dharma, you can read 1 or 2 a month for free, and from the archive, but then they'll shut you off until you get a subscription. But anyway, she's just talking about how that, even that conceit that I'm the same as you, creates all this sort of self, like creating an out for the self. And she gives several examples, like being on retreat and seeing the teacher, the respected Dharma teacher drop their plate at lunch, be a moment of mindlessness, and thinking, oh, they're just like me. I'm so glad. It's sort of, we use that conceit that we're all the same to avoid inspiring ourselves to what might be possible. And she gives the example of when The Inconvenient Truth, is that what it was called? The documentary that Al Gore helped put together. And then a lot in the news after, I even remember this, and maybe some of you do too, there was a lot of people were writing about his big house, wherever it was, and how much energy he used. Somehow they got a hold of the utility records for his house. And of course he had solar panels and stuff, which they didn't mention. But it's a sort of thing like, oh, I don't really have to take this seriously. I don't really have to stretch or be good. So this is like that equality conceit is what it's sometimes called in the tradition. There's thinking we're better than, and there's a lot of thinking we're worse than. But even thinking we're the same as, then the Buddha was really clear. Any kind of conceit is problematic. It's a cause for suffering. We don't need to construct that. And it seems amazing. This is, the Buddha's making this point really clearly. Practitioners, whatever in this world is seen, heard, sensed, cognized, attained, sought after, pondered by the intellect, that I do know, that I directly know. That is known by the Tathagata. So that's what the Buddha referred to himself as. The one thus gone is what Tathagata means, something like that. But the Tathagata has not been obsessed with it. Thus, practitioners, the Tathagata, when seeing what is to be seen, does not construe an object as seen. He does not construe an unseen. He does not construe an object to be seen. He does not construe a seer, right? He's not adding anything extra. It's just that being known. And he goes through all the sense gates, when hearing, when sensing, when cognizing what is to be cognized. He does not construe an object as cognized. He does not construe it as uncognized. He does not construe an object to be cognized. He does not construe a cognizer. Thus, the Tathagata being such, like with regard to all phenomena that can be seen, heard, sensed, cognized, is such. And I tell you, there is no other such, higher or more sublime. And it's just, I think, a beautiful way to open our mind to how simple things can be. It's almost like, there's a natural process here called mark, that we generally refer to as Mark or Jonah or whatever. But we're just dragging all this extra baggage along just because of habit. So the practice is just to stabilize and empower presence to see what's extra, to see what can cease. Because whatever it is we're dragging along, like the conceits that everything, we're sitting, we're having a relatively good 3 seconds, and there's a conceit, there's a sense of ownership of that short spell of the mind being less crazy, or the mind is really all over the place, and there's a conceit, it's taken personally. So that whatever that weight is that's dragging along, it's ceasing all the time, it's just getting renewed over and over again. All the time. And we can observe both. We want to see both. And I was reading some of Joseph Goldstein's teachings today, and he was really trying to inspire us about like an experience of fear. And just like how substantial that is. Can you find the one who's afraid? We think we can, but we haven't really brought a lot of integrity to see where's the problem. It's almost like that can be a good question. Like when you feel some burden, like things are going well, some resonant hurt or whatever it might be, where actually is the problem? And if you stay with it, you'll get probably to the place where there's this Vedana, there's this feeling tone, that's what Vedana means, of unpleasantness. There's this sense, unpleasantness is being sensed, there's unpleasantness and it's being known. And that's about as much as we can say. And even that unpleasantness that's being known is quite dynamic. It isn't some edifice that we superficially presume is there. It's actually quite alive. And interestingly, and you could just observe this in your experiencing of pain or anything unpleasant, the more there is interest and integrity and continuity in observing the unpleasantness, that non-fear with the unpleasantness, that continuity of mindfulness and wisdom, which would involve kindness and compassion as well, and patience and forgiveness and so many wholesome qualities, the mind that's knowing the fear is really wholesome and therefore a cause for pleasure, right? And maybe some of you know this experience where the samadhi, the mind that is, the stable mind that is knowing what is unpleasant, the pleasantness of that mind that knows the unpleasantness is more what's present than the unpleasantness that's being known. I know that sounds like a mouthful, but that's how often because some of the pain won't go away, if you got an ouch, a wound or something like that, and it's just gonna ache for a couple weeks or whatever. But the way of relating to the painful sensations is very much in play. I mean, I had a lot of practice. I was telling Dave earlier this evening, I just had one of these hellish travel experiences last 24 hours, basically. I was teaching a retreat in North Carolina that ended around noon, 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon in the beautiful mountains in western North Carolina. And then I got driven to Asheville Airport, which was a zoo, and there's big storms all through the southeast, and everything was backed up. So I didn't get into Atlanta till 1, and had to find a hotel, and I had to wear a mask. It was just hellish, and all I could do was bring a wise and kind attitude to the unpleasantness, right? Because if the habits of the mind were to relate to the unpleasantness, it would be really painful. I mean, it was like so Kafkaesque. I mean, so many calls to Delta and the discussions with the agents, and because there were just probably thousands and thousands of people who had to reschedule because the storms were late afternoon and evening. At some point, people can't make their connecting flights, and then lots of problems. And it's so, just that tendency to grasp and the use of a self-view is very much, that groove is very deep in our minds, right? So we need this, we borrow the Buddha's teachings and practices, and it saves us so much suffering. Even when I got to Atlanta, found a hotel, got an Uber, and then there's like 2 places with the same name, Wyndham. It's, I think, a big chain of hotels, but there was another place. So the Uber dropped me off. I go in, say, okay, I got a reservation. No, this is like some Spanish named hotel, but it wasn't the one I was supposed to be at. And then so I had to get another Uber, and she showed me, like, because she had to pick me up, that the Uber GPS said, no, this is your hotel. So there was some, I guess it used to be, I'm not sure what the problem was, but it was just like all those things that it just, that conceit, oh, it shouldn't be this way. It's not supposed to be this way, and that it would be so easy for that sense of self to congeal. It's like so much, like a lawyer, I've got a lot of evidence that this is a problem for me, right? And so we're feeling, sensing that tug or that movement to the off-ramp into conceit, into selfing. And of course, the mind will take it sometimes, like when wisdom and awareness isn't stable, isn't continuous, then yeah, the mind will run with it for a time. But generally, if we have some momentum in our practice, as that sense of me being the sufferer, the one who is suffering, as that sort of stabilizes and congeals, that will wake us up. It's like a mindfulness bell. Oh, there's this appearance of me suffering here, and I'm pretty sure it doesn't have to be this way, that suffering is optional. There used to be this teaching line that was used a lot. Pain is unavoidable, suffering is optional. Something like that. Maybe some of you have heard that. And I like it. I mean, it's simplistic, of course, but the point is, we're not going to avoid painful experience, but how we relate to them. Like, does the grasping that's deeply embedded in our mind, and then the grasping using that personality view, that self-view, to do its work of grasping. And it really feeds off of the Vedana, the pleasantness or unpleasantness, and even the neutrality of the moment. When it's neutral, right, then grasping doesn't want to have anything to do with it because it's neutral. And when it's unpleasant, grasping, that tendency, this we get away from. And when it's pleasant, this we hold on to. And we took birth here, whatever this life is, we're here in the grasping realm. And in a way, the spiritual curriculum is, well, what are we going to do about it? And what the Buddha did about it is he realized that what keeps the whirlpool going, the grasping and the generating, the activity of selfing to perpetuate the grasping, wanting what we want, hating what we hate, is not seeing it. I mean, one of the strategies that is always helpful is the ABC. Some of you remember this because I mentioned it a lot from Joko Beck, a bigger container. Like, how do we bring in a big view? And we do that too, when pain, the grasping mind, selfing mind, it's the like hone in, just like I wanted to hone in on the Uber drivers, or the first one. And I was feeling so generous, big tip and a pleasant ride. It's like, wait, is it too late? Can I take that back? Of course, it wasn't his fault at all, I'm the one who, selected that place for him to drop me off. It was just wrong on their little internal GPS. So that, how do we escape that? Is that willingness to have a bigger view. Some of you might remember one of the discourses, it seems a little strange, but I think in a way it has the sense of opening the mind to vastness. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago, I think in the Sunday and Tuesday classes. But there's a sutta where the Buddha, and we'll do it sort of in a fast way, but he would ask people to imagine a town or village and the people and the homes that those people have and all the human-made aspects. I just, flew back today. I was looking out the window, just flying through the Midwest, and you see in the sort of flat farmland, the mile squares, because that's how whenever they were surveying the land, after the Louisiana Purchase and all this new land, they just mapped it out in squares of a mile. And the roads, you can see them, that patchwork, 1 square mile after another in sort of nice little squares. And just all the human construction that you can observe. So we focus on that for a while, just like you can take Minneapolis and the bridges and the homes, the roads, all the human-made things, the cars and the bicycles, the people. And then the Buddha would say, okay, now just be aware of the other living things, the plants and animals, but nothing human-made. So then you imagine Minneapolis, but now we're just seeing the trees and the grass and the flowers and the squirrels and the birds. And we're just not attending to the buildings and the cars and the bridges. Right? So just play with that image, Minneapolis, just the living things other than human-made things. And then, as you develop that perception, then the Buddha would say, now just imagine, this, but don't include human-made things and don't include any plants or animals. So you're just seeing the shape of the land, the river gulch, the Mississippi River Gulch, the rocks, the dirt, right? Just the earth minus the living things and the things that living things make. And then he says, now take away the earth. So then you just have space, and then you contemplate the space where there is the earth, but you're not attending to the earth or the plants or the people and what they've made, but just the space. And then if you remove the space, you just have knowing. There's knowing, but it's not really knowing anything. It's just knowing. It used to know the space and those other things, but now there's just knowing. And I know this gets subtle, but that's the point. Then he would have you remove the knowing. Don't attend to the knowing. So what is there? Well, there's nothing. So then you attend to that, to the not knowing. And he'd even, now take nothingness out. Don't attend to the nothing. And the training, you should try this as a meditation. And on Dharma Seed, there's a couple. I know Ajahn Punadhammo has a guided one up on Dharma Seed, and I think there's a couple other teachers who have done this, like a 30 or 45-minute guided meditation that we did in whatever it was, 5 minutes. But it's really useful to demonstrate to ourselves that our habits of perceptions are just that. They're just habits. And see, selfing is just a way of framing things that the mind is very used to. But it doesn't have to be that way. And the other thing about that, just that refinement, is similar to how simple things can be. I'm imagining some of you have that experience of, like, when you're sitting and there's a self-centered problem, and it's unpleasant, but there's enough confidence and stability. And there's sort of like, we're there, but what is also there is the conceit that this is my problem and I want it to go away. So it won't go away because the mind is already confirming its existence by wanting to go away. If it's not self and not what belongs to a self, there's no self who wants it, needs it to go away, right? So to really work with the Buddhist view, the wisdom and awareness, the mindfulness has to be empty of conceit, empty of attachment, empty of an agenda. We have to just really just let it be what it is, let it reveal itself, the problem. And it's sort of interesting, like even last night, with all the travel, dukkha, just sitting there and feeling the squeeze, the weight, the burden of not liking and not being identified with the not liking. And, in moments at least, being interested in it. And I had a little bit of momentum in my practice from even though I was teaching the retreat, still it's good for me just in terms of practice. And just to be interested, and then when the sweet spot is there, meaning the awareness isn't tainted by selfing, right? And then there's the edifice of the one who is suffering dissolves. I mean, it can come right back, but what is demonstrated in that moment is it isn't an edifice, right? It's sort of reconfirming that suffering is optional. Now, depending on the confidence and stability at that time and how seductive the conditions are, that experience of release may be ongoing or it may not be, just depends. But we want to recognize that because that is very affirming of what the Buddha teaches. And so the heart wisdom will understand, oh, there's really something to these practices. I guess the Buddha knew what he was talking about. And what is true for the Buddha is also true for me, right? Which is the whole point of having a Buddha, having a teacher, right? One of the important roles of a teacher is to be a model or a symbol of what is possible. Because otherwise we tend towards resignation because it's hard work. And we're actually okay doing hard work if we think it leads somewhere, but it's very easy to have doubt, like, it's just not in the cards for me. I'm not built to do this practice. Or whatever, how many versions of giving up have we experienced in our practice? A lot. So I wanted to read a little bit from that article Christina Feldman's article, and I want to thank Tom Shaw and Melissa, who sent in some questions. I tried to weave them in tonight, so hopefully you heard a response. Just one more thing about Melissa's comments and questions, because they mentioned how easy it is with practice to begin to notice the anicca, the impermanent aspect of one's experience, and the dukkha, unsatisfactory aspect, but not so easy to sense in a direct way the anatta quality. And a lot of that is because we're noticing, it isn't that selfing isn't self. I know it sounds funny, but that pattern, like when I do something that's self-centered and the mind's really identified, taking something personally, that is emptiness. That's a natural process. It isn't self. Selfing isn't self. Selfing is just something being known. And that's really important because when we notice, like, the anatta is sort of the ordinary state, not the extraordinary state, right? There's selfing, and then noticing selfing ceasing. But you don't find not self. There isn't, it's like a self doesn't become a not self. It's just letting selfing reveal what it is. It's just something being known. And that, in a way, it breaks the cycle of whatever it is that's feeding that pattern. So I'll leave that there. But anyway, just to end before we start our small groups, this is from Christina Feldman's article. I just wanted to read the last paragraph. A teacher was asked, "What is the secret to your happiness and equanimity?" She answered, "A wholehearted, unrestricted cooperation with the unavoidable." A wholehearted, unrestricted cooperation with the unavoidable. This is the secret and the essence of a Bao. So Christina, in this article, at the beginning at least, just being a hardcore Buddhist practitioner and studying with a lot of Asian teachers and also in Asia, bowing is a big deal in the culture and in the Buddhist practice. And just thinking of all kinds of reasons why I'm not going to do that or I'm not interested in that. And just talking about what she learned over the years of her practice. This is the secret and essence of a Bao. It is the heart of mindfulness and compassion. To bow is to no longer hold ourselves apart from the unpredictable nature of all of our lives. It is to cultivate a heart that can be unconditionally welcome, that can unconditionally welcome all things. We bow to what is, to all of life, by liberating our minds from ideas of better than, worse than, or the same as. We liberate ourselves from all views of self and other. The Bao is a way to the end of suffering, to an awakened heart. And that's that kind of submission. We're submitting to the present moment without dependence on our habit energies, like selfing. So again, in the small groups, you can share about conceits and how that has manifested in your life. And just your experience of seeing selfing and seeing that selfing isn't a problem, it's the misunderstanding of selfing that's the problem. Yeah, thinking that it's referring back, as opposed to, no, it's just that pattern. So I'll leave it here. We'll divide the groups. So Austin is going to divide the folks on Zoom into groups of 3 or 4.